Today is Friday, December 5th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. A massive fraud scandal is unfolding in Minnesota. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating. You can email us your thoughts as well. quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Glad you're here with us. We're here again, getting through the news of the day, bright and early. We're here each and every weekday morning, bright and early for you. Joining me today, CBN's Trey Phillips, says we have a lot to get to on the podcast today. And on the focus story, we've got a story brewing out of Canada on religious exemptions.
Yeah, so they're going after religious exemptions under the guise of anti-Semitism, and there's a lot of criticism of that. So we'll get into all the details and try to make sense of some of it here in a few minutes.
All right, details on that just in a moment. And also on the main thing, an 88-year-old veteran was working at a grocery store just to get by when his story sort of went viral, and he's about to get a huge surprise. And that great story is coming up on the main thing. All right, I want to talk about our sponsor of today's podcast, Christian Solidarity International. We here at Quick Start, we've partnered with them and their ministry dedicated to helping persecuted Christians around the globe. We're always reporting on these stories. We've seen them. Nigeria right now is a hotspot where Christians are being targeted in large numbers. And so we're already praying and letting you know about the things that are happening there in other parts of the world where religious persecution, Christian persecution is extremely high, and it's extremely dangerous to be a Christian. And so we're here at Quick Start. We inform you on that, and we let you know about it, and we pray with you on that for our brothers and sisters in Christ. Christian Solidarity International, they are on the front lines with some of the hardest places in the world, and they are there providing relief, rescue, and long-term support for those persecuted Christians. They do this by helping free people who might be trapped in what we would call as modern day slavery. They do things like providing food and shelter and medical care. They support pastors. They're very important to do. You have pastors on the ground. These are people that are risking their life just for doing what they do, something that we take for granted here in America for sure. Just a pastor, right? That's somebody who's likely revered for the most part here in America. Even by secular society, they would say, oh, that person's going to be, an upstanding person in our society. Well, in certain places of the world, you are risking your life being a pastor. So places like CSI are going to help them and give them support that they need as they minister to the people who are living under pressure and under threat in many places around the world. And of course, at CSI, everything's grounded in a Christian mission. They see every person they help as made in the image of God. So a great organization, CSI, Christian Solidarity International. You want to help these people that we're talking about all the time that are really in the line of fire and persecution in places like Nigeria. Just go to csi-usa.org. Again, that's csi-usa.org. And we're going to go to the news now in 90 seconds. And Minnesota's $1 billion COVID fraud scandal is back in the spotlight, and Representative Ilhan Omar is on the defensive over how it got so out of control. She was on CNN with Jake Tapper, and she struggled to explain how such massive fraud took root in her home state, blaming a quickly built COVID relief program for having a lack of guardrails in place to stop this, saying the government relied too heavily on third-party groups to push out aid money. So basically, if you're not familiar, the scandal centers on what prosecutors are saying was a huge web of fake charities and shell companies, including the Feeding Our Future network. And they're accused of stealing hundreds of millions in federal food and COVID aid by filing phony meal claims, inventing kids who never showed up, and funneling tax dollars into luxury homes, cars, and overseas transfers. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, who was the 2024 Democratic VP nominee, was under heavy fire now for what whistleblowers and state workers describe as systematic failures and retaliation. Those are just some of today's top headlines. You can check out more stories over at cbnnews.com. And this story is insane, Trey, because not only are we seeing the COVID fraud, but this in Minnesota, if you remember just a couple years ago, federal prosecutors uncovered a major Medicaid fraud scheme involving autism therapy centers in Minnesota. And one of the most high-profile cases there involved a group called Mind, Body, and Soul. That's MBS, Children's Services. They billed Medicaid for tens of millions in fake autism therapy services. The money was then sent overseas to places like Somalia. And so now, investigators have been looking into whether some of these funds were funneled or used by extremist elements. And so what we're seeing unfold here in Minnesota on the latest scandal, this COVID one, is just how involved were some of the government officials like Walz, like Keith Ellison. They were potentially talking to a lot of these people in these groups, and it sounded like you have, some wrongdoing here potentially from these officials. That's still all being investigated, but man, it really makes you frustrated when in the midst of something like COVID, when everybody was struggling, you had people that were willing to do this.
I also wonder, is our time, do we live in a more scandalous time than ever before, or do we just get all of this information much quicker than previous generations, right? It's just the insanity of the things that happened during COVID, the COVID era in particular. I hope that it's something that we look back on and study and realize, well, I'm never going to do that again, because there was all kinds of just rampant abuse of power and of money. And yeah, I just think our tendency as human beings towards sinfulness was laid pretty bare during COVID. I think, yeah, this scandal is just insane. And also, the cherry on top in all of this is the fact that Tim Walz was potentially, just a few votes away from being the vice president of the United States.
Yeah. And that's a good question about, are we more scandalous now? I mean, of course, as Christians, we know.
If you look at the Bible, I tend to think we're probably not more scandalous.
Right. Right. Yes. We can all be thankful for the era of Noah, when everybody was so bad that God used up his one flood over there on them. And we're not going to be getting flooded out because of his promises, thankfully. But yeah, I mean, I think sin is always, as we read in scripture, has been in the world since Adam and Eve. So we know we're sinful. We know we're fallen, and it's going to be here. I think with the digital age, there's probably just a lot more opportunity for people to take advantage, right? It's just easy to file a claim. You can go online, and especially during COVID when everything was chaotic, bad actors see that as opportunity. Whereas most of us think you don't even think that way, right? I'm not even thinking, how am I going to scam the system? But you forget, there are people who are just like, ooh, this is great. They're never going to know.
Well, and it didn't help either, which we've talked about this so many times on the podcast, Dan, is nobody was allowed to ask questions during COVID either. So it's like, if you ask a question, then, you're a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist who doesn't think that this is a life or death situation. It's like, okay, I'm allowed to ask questions. I'm allowed to be skeptical of big pharma and of our government, which we're back to being okay with now because Donald Trump is president and COVID is over. But when Donald Trump wasn't president and COVID was here, we had to put away all of our questions, which I think allowed more of this to run unchecked.
Yeah, I think so too. And listen, hopefully this thing gets sorted out. They get to the bottom of it, because trust is already at an all-time low in our government institutions. And if they can't have guardrails up and the people in place can't be trusted, even less than they are now, then we could really be in for some kind of unsettling time. So be praying there for sure. All right, we're going to go to the focus story now. And as I mentioned there, we've got this issue brewing in Canada. So tell me about this proposal on religious exemptions and what's going on there.
So the change centers on Canada's hate speech laws, which obviously that right at the outset of the conversation sets Canada apart from the United States. They already have robust hate speech laws in Canada, but previously, I mean, currently, unless this proposal goes through, there's a religious exemption in place that's kind of embedded into the hate speech laws there in Canada, which right now that means that under the criminal code, their hateful or anti-Semitic speech is, of course, banned, that you can be prosecuted for that, but there are carve-outs for religious issues. Like, for example, if it's a Christian who's speaking out about Christianity and about the coming of Jesus, somebody could interpret that as anti-Semitic. There are laws there in Canada that would protect a Christian, for example, from facing any sort of prosecution, because they could look and say on its face, okay, they're not being anti-Semitic, they're just speaking about their views about Jesus. So that's just one example, but this new latest proposal is led by the governing Liberal Party of Canada, and they struck this deal with another group, another voting bloc in Canada that would remove the religious exemption completely from what is referred to as Bill C9, in an attempt to strengthen hate speech laws. The people who want to pass the law are saying, well, we need to remove this religious exemption because it's carving the way for more anti-Semitic speech. It's carving the way even for somebody to hang a Nazi flag outside their property, which, of course, is already banned. That this is just the argument that they're making to try to cut out this religious exemption law. So that's where it stands right now, but it's growing, it's getting more and more support.
No, you said that they obviously in Canada, they've got all of these different apparent guardrails that they've tried to put in place to try to regulate certain speech, this hate speech, they call it. So what's motivating, since they already have a lot of this in place, what is motivating this push now?
Well, some of it, I think you would look at it and say on its face, well, I agree with a lot of the motivation, right? I mean, they're pointing to the uptick in anti-Semitism really around the world. I mean, we're seeing a lot of that here at home in the United States on the left and increasingly on the right. They're seeing the same thing happening in Canada. So the argument is, well, we want to fortify our laws so that anti-Semitic actions, anti-Semitic verbiage isn't able to sneak through under some sort of loophole of a religious belief, because they're arguing there are people who are not actually authentic believers in whatever religion that they're espousing. They're just espousing that certain religious belief so that they can say and do anti-Semitic things. So this law, the C9 bill, is intended to kind of put the kibosh on any sort of anti-Semitism in the country. And they have, again, pointed to growing anti-Semitism around the world and specifically in the West as the motivation for this change.
And so what are critics saying right now about it?
Yeah, so the critics are, as you would imagine, widespread. There's been a ton of criticism of it, a lot of it from conservatives. Some religious and faith-based organizations like the Christian Legal Fellowship have warned that eliminating the religious belief defense undermines constitutional balance of protecting both equality and religious freedom. This is an argument that we talk about all the time here on the Quick Start podcast and at CBN News. It's, well, we'll protect all of the other groups, but we're not going to protect Christians. We're not going to protect conservative Christians. And that's what these organizations have argued. It's that, okay, it's all well and good to protect minority groups or to protect groups with particular interests, but Christians are included in that group of people with particular interests. And making this broad brush decision, let's exclude all religious exemptions from the law, while it might eliminate some, might eliminate some issues of real anti-Semitism, it also is, again, painting with a broad brush and chipping away at people's religious freedoms, which that's also a lot of critics have said, like, is this actually intended to deal with anti-Semitism, or are you using that as a guise to actually attack religious liberty here in Canada?
Yeah, and I think this is one of the issues, just on a even higher level, looking at a higher view, of just having to try to regulate hate speech and try to say, like, this is wrong and that's wrong and you can't say this and you can say that. It's just generally not a good idea, because it just becomes too hard to police this. And I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip, Trey, and we should maybe talk about this one next week, but Piers Morgan was interviewing a woman from the UK who was the latest to get barged in by the police at her home while she was in the bath, this according to her. and she was naked in the bathtub, and they come barging into her house and give her no privacy over what? Apparently she texted a friend and used a kind of a, I'm just not going to say it, but I mean, it wasn't that bad of a word. It's something you've heard commonly, right? It's certainly a pejorative, but to have the police come barging into your home over texting a friend it's crazy. It's crazy. And so the UK is the most off the rails on this kind of stuff. But when you see laws like this in Canada and they're trying to push this stuff, it's only a matter of time. It is only a matter of time if you keep allowing this to go on, that we're inevitably going to be talking ourselves into, yeah, you know what? We should have the police go ahead and make sure we're checking up on all these hate speech people. It's crazy, and it's not a good path to be going down.
Well, it's the same thing that we did during COVID, right? If it's for our safety,
right,
then we'll go ahead and
we put all of our values aside.
Yeah, if it will make us safer, then go ahead and do it. And that's to what we were talking about on the podcast yesterday about violence, about words being violence. It's the same thing. If I can start to put tangible language around the word somebody's saying, like, oh, this is a form of violence, this is assault, oh, there are laws in place that protect me against being assaulted. So that's really what's happening here. It's like, let's go in through a back door of, this is actually just to protect you. And then we wake up 5 years down the road and all of our freedoms have been eroded or ultimately even taken away in the most extreme instances, all because we wanted to be a little bit safer. So I think we just need to be careful, to your point, when we're talking about legislating speech, because where is the line? I think it's too murky. It's too blurry. How do you draw a line? And the line is going to be different depending on who's in office. So just think, do I want to have this law in office while the people that are in office are people I support? Am I still going to want to have the law when the people in office are people opposed to what my politics are? So yeah, I think we should be thinking twice before agreeing to chip away at any sort of speech.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and as we're recording this podcast, I see another story come across my screen of a teacher in Ireland who's going to be spending Christmas in jail after refusing to use preferred pronouns for a trans identifying student. And again, this is all connected to the words are violence and that sort of thing, and hate speech and trying to regulate speech. And it's crazy. It is just crazy. Yeah. I mean, we're better off having speech you don't like and then just growing some thicker skins and being able to move on with life and not crumple up into a ball and demand people thrown in jail because they said something we don't like. It's crazy town. But important story. Appreciate you bringing that one to the podcast today. And we're going to go to the main thing now. And, you know, Trey, I'll let you got this interview here and of the guy who helped bring this story to light. But man, this is just a great story coming out of sort of a tough spot. An 88-year-old veteran who was working at a grocery store. You should be retired at that point, you know, especially because he's 88, but also a veteran. You would hope his country would get his back somehow, and it looks like the internet has done just that.
Yeah, it's an absolutely incredible story, and as you'll hear in the conversation, the veteran, Ed Bombas, he doesn't even know yet that more than $1.5 million have been raised for him. He's actually going to find out later today about this. So it's an absolutely incredible story. An 88-year-old guy who he lost his pension when GM went belly up, and really had no penny to his name, even though he did serve his country. But an incredible story.
And his wife got sick, and that's how he had to pay for all those medical bills without the insurance, so he was basically depleted.
Yeah. Well, the last thing I was going to say is somebody who's been through so much, he's been knocked down so many times, and is still so hopeful. So it couldn't happen to a better guy, really, from what I understand. So this conversation, I think, will be really an encouragement to you.
All right. That conversation's coming up right now on today's main thing.
Sam, you are the guy behind the now viral video of Ed Bombas, an 88-year-old Army veteran still working full-time at a grocery store after losing his pension, which he goes through in the full video on your social media channel. Your interview with him has sparked so many donations on GoFundMe that the total is now more than $1.5 million. So tell us some of the backstory of how you came to even know who Ed is.
Yeah, of course. So thank you so much. So yeah, my name's Samuel Wiedenhofer. I run an amazing kindness and mental health community. To be honest, it was a little bit of luck. Like, it was God as well. I just received a comment on my Facebook page saying there's an elderly man who works at Maya in Brighton, Detroit. And they actually didn't say too much about his story. They said they've never asked him, but he's just such an incredible person, and they can tell that he's going through something. So that's when I decided, to come to Detroit and just to walk up to him and ask what his story is. And I know that sounds crazy, but I honestly didn't have much backstory on Ed. And to see what has come out of it, and to have him share his story and how authentically, it came across, because it was at complete random, out of the blue. And now it's inspired millions. Like, it's unbelievable to see the support that's come through.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're exactly right. This was definitely a God-ordained interaction that the two of you were able to meet, because his story really is incredible. As I said, he's 88 years old. He's lost so much unfairly. And not only is he resilient, Sam, but he's also positive. And so I wonder what was going through your mind as you were hearing him share his story.
Yeah, it broke my heart, because I think it's not just a situation that Ed's going through. It's a situation that, especially lots of Americans and people around the world are going through. Veterans who have, fought for their country, veterans who have gone through so much for their country, and they're not treated as well as they should be, right? Like, no 88-year-old should have to work. And that breaks my heart. And I hope that, this creates a bigger change, because there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of Eds, and I think that's why it's gone so big, is because it's so relatable as well.
Yeah. He said in another interview, Ed, he said, "I'm fortunate God gave me a good enough body to be strong enough to stand here for 8.5 hours a day." And his humility really has been honestly convicting, even for me, just to watch the way that he's carried himself through all of this. What do you make of his faith in the face of all that he's gone through?
Oh, I think it's beautiful, and I always say those who, well, one, are strongest in faith. Two, like, those people who are just so kind and have such a good soul are like, they're the ones going through something, right? They're the Eds out there. And just to know he's going through everything breaks my heart. But like I said, to see the support, it's just been unbelievable. And what's even more crazy is after doing this video, I wanted to search into some backstory about, hey, like, he has a son, but why is he still working then? So I found out afterwards, and I never found this out in the original interview, that Ed has $225,000 of debts to pay off before he leaves this earth. And he didn't want to leave those to his son, or have risk of his son or family having to pay those off for him. So that's why he's still working. It's not because, realistically, yes, he has to, but it's to pay off that debt, because he doesn't want to leave it on his family. And that shows what sort of person he is. He's not just working to, get by the bills he has. His son does take a lot of care of him. It's those debts he still has. And that's why he's working. And I found that just, heartbreaking. And to see the support, no one even knew that. That. It's just amazing.
Have you been in touch with Ed since this blew up? I mean, it's just been a couple days, but from no money at all to $1.5+ million. Have you had any contact with him?
What's unbelievable is I've heard he's a celebrity at Maya now. He has lots of people, waiting to see him. No one, from what I know, has told him the amount. We've told all news people who talk to him to keep this secret. You say something like you're in big trouble. Apparently, at the moment, as it stands, and I think, look, if someone did say something, he would think it's a joke. He's still holding on to that $400 I gave him, because he's like, oh, I've been praying to my wife. I've been going to a graveyard and asking her, how did this happen? Why are all the news coming here? So it's still a bit of a shock to him. But he's still got that $400 in his pocket, because he's like, what happens if I have to give it back? That's the type of person he is. So he, at the moment, he's just happy to have $400 and couple interviews on the news, but he has zero idea on this amount. And that's why I haven't been speaking too closely with him, because I'm scared to give something away myself.
Yeah.
So I've had a friend in Detroit, the Basquatch Hunter, who has a Discovery Channel. He's been, very close with Ed and attending interviews with him, kind of on my behalf till I see him tomorrow. So.
Well, speaking of all of the interviews and all of the reaction that this has sparked, what do you make of that reaction? Have you been shocked by how much this story has resonated with people?
I've been shocked. First of all, the fundraiser, for an individual creator to, have a community and build a community like that is it's record breaking. And I spoke to GoFundMe, and they are pretty certain it's the biggest ever for one person to make. We have things for George Floyd, fundraisers like that of course raise a lot, but for one individual person, promoting it to begin with, to get to that level, it's just unbelievable. The support from the media, so many people can relate, and it builds so much hope in a country that system is so broken right now, I think, and it could be making a bigger change in ways we don't even know. And that's what I think I'm most proud of. It's not even, and I think Ed too, it's not even the donations, it's the support that hopefully, this can raise awareness to all the veterans out there so they can get more support, right? I spoke to Ed about and because he wasn't in a veteran for 20 years, he's not eligible for a lot of that support from the government as well. So that's why we found out, to get a veteran, it's got to be 20 years to have good benefits. So that's why he's, still working away. So yeah.
You said at the start of our conversation that you're a mental health activist and, of course, a content creator. So what was it that drew you, Sam, to this kind of work to begin with? Of
course. So, yeah, it's a day that definitely broke me as a person. But when I was 10, my mum was in the shower, and I saw a phone call come in from my uncle. And I picked the phone call up, and it was my uncle screaming and crying and bursting into absolute tears. I lost my auntie to suicide, that night. And it just broke me. I've never heard pain in someone's voice like that ever again, and it's just hurt me so much. And yeah, that's why, I do it in honor of her and all those out there. I believe if you see a video, you can save someone's life. And I believe because of her, so many lives have been saved. But I always, give thanks to her for, I don't know, it's my purpose on this world is to spread awareness for her and all those out there struggling. So even though it's a day that broke me, I feel very, glad I'm able to spread awareness because of her. So it just drives me to keep making a difference out there. And, I'm inspired to keep doing this, meet many more veterans. Today, we're helping an 85-year-old veteran who had cancer a while back, and that's why he's in debt. He still has to keep working. So we're going to go meet him in a couple hours. So, yeah.
Well, that's awesome. He has no idea the encouragement that is headed his way. So, Sam, thank you so much for taking some time, and thank you for the work you do.
Of course, all good. Yes, and I hope he doesn't know about it. We'll find out tomorrow.
All right, appreciate that conversation there. And I hope we get a follow-up here. At least we could post about it on when we see his reaction to getting this gift. And I was talking, Trey, with you earlier that I think that he's probably going to end up giving a lot of this away, maybe to his own family, to friends or whatever, because he's 88. This guy, this is the type of guy that knows how to live with not a lot, right? He's going through tough times, but he seems okay, right? Relatively, he's able to make it, and he's thankful. He seems like he's a believer. So yeah, so can't wait to see his reaction. Hopefully we can bring that to you as well. But that's going to leave us with time on the podcast this week for one last thing.
We are looking at Philippians 2:3, which I think is a perfectly appropriate verse after hearing about Ed's story. It says, "Do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves." Amen. Great verse to live by right there. It's way easier said than done.
the old rule of thumb. I mean, we're just selfish before anything else. You know, look at a family photo or photo with friends, and where do your eyes go to first? Like, how do I look in this thing? That's just the way we're wired with our sin nature. So, good verse to remember, Philippians 2:3. And with that, get yourself on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. Have a fantastic weekend. See you back here next week.